Siddeeq. I know, Siddeeq, you are half local, so and you'll introduce yourself. Siddeeq is somebody that I've known for quite a while, and is an industry person. MRICS, SEC PVP, registered valuer, and we lost contact for some time, and then I got to find out now when we were preparing for this particular webinar that he's now a half local. So, but he will explain. He will take you through what he's busy with. I also want to acknowledge and just the Academy of Construction and Real Estate. I am a director there for allowing us to have this opportunity. This particular webinar is one of a series of webinars that the Academy of Construction and Real Estate will be rolling out. One of the things that, as a practicing valuer, one of the things that I've picked up is that, as talking to many other valuers and talking to other practitioners here locally and somewhere else, is that there are few opportunities where you get direct support unless you've got a mentor. And particularly once you become a professional, the opportunities for mentorship gets to be very limited. As a result, we needed to create a platform in which we can support each other. We can be able to share the experiences that we have in the field. So this is one in a series of what we call Valuation Education Series. And then we'll try and have one at least once a month or a little bit more, depending on what topics that we can come up with. And thanks for the Academy of Construction and Real Estate to allow us to be able to do that. I'm joined by Siddeeq Omar, who, as I said, is somebody in the industry that I've known for a while, and he will take us through his experience and expertise. And this platform is created for that, where different experts in valuation and the practitioners in valuation gets invited to this platform so that we can share the lessons in a format that is very short. It's about an hour. I know it's set up for an hour and a half. But after an hour, if there's nothing else, because there are other 30 minutes for Q&A, all of us will say our goodbyes and leave. My name, for those that have never met me or those that have joined us for the first time, it's Mashilo Pitjeng. I am the managing director of a company called BLK Asset Solutions. BLK Asset Solutions specializes in real estate advisory and consulting in areas of real estate market research, development feasibility studies, and all of those kind of beautiful things. We do property valuations as well as we do property inspections. Siddeeq, the floor is yours. You can introduce yourself and take us through the short sessions that you have prepared for us.
Cool. Can you hear me there?
100%. I can hear you very well.
Okay, cool. All right. First off, just like to introduce myself very quickly. As Mashilo has introduced me very briefly, my name is Siddeeq Omar. I am, like he said, I'm half local. What he means by that is now I'm actually to clarify, I'm a hybrid. So I have dual citizenship with Australia and South Africa. And I started out in South Africa as a chartered valuation surveyor. I used to work for Brole Property Group many years ago. And that just started off my career in valuations, in which I excelled. And I took my career further and progressed in my career. I then joined CBRE in Johannesburg and propelled and excelled in my career. And then I moved to Australia. I am now based in Sydney, but I come back to South Africa to visit family and spend time with family here. But I still continue working online remotely. I'm now the current team leader. I've got a team that works under me and reports directly to me in terms of the reports that we provide for our clients. What I will do is I will just share a little bit of a glimpse into my line of work and the kind of work we do, keeping in mind the subject topic of today's program being analyzing leases. The core essentials, whether it's here in South Africa or whether you are doing work internationally, the essentials of a lease maintain it has the similarities or overlap with slight differentiations in the terminology and the vocabulary and what they call certain things in a lease. So, for example, I'll share my screen shortly, but I'll run through a few examples with the listeners just so they can hear. But if anyone's watching, they can see a visual presentation of what I'm about to share very quickly. Okay, Mashilo, can you just tell me, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. I'm looking at a spreadsheet on the screen.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. So what I'm going to show you now is I've transitioned my career from being a conventional valuer to now being a commercial due diligence property specialist. So what clients do for us is they come to us and they request for us to conduct a due diligence on the viability of investing in an asset before they buy the property. Quite similar to a valuation report. However, this is a slightly different in a sense where we still conduct the lease analysis. However, we do not provide this for the banks. We provide this to our clients directly. So it's a slight difference, but the essentials are still there. So what I've put together, this is a live example, a working example that of a property that I conducted due diligence on. You see, we've got a template spreadsheet that captures the information. The essentials of the lease being, this one is in particular a multi-tenanted property, but I will open up a single tenanted property example so you can see, so it's easier without going too much into detail because of the consciousness of time. So for example, we've got this one here, this particular example, that's the client's name, that's the purchase price. They all vary in pricing. The yield is calculated as a result of the net income divided by the purchase price, which gives you the net yield. The title details would be similar to an IRF number, urban number here in South Africa. Strata, that means sectional title. In Australia, you can actually buy property sectional title. Here in South Africa, it's majority of it being freehold properties. Then we've got, for example, the land area. When it's sectional title, there's no land area attributed to it, but a parent lot size. If it's freehold, it would have a land area. Then we move on to things that this sort of information you'd capture from the title document as well as from the lease. Now, in terms of lettable area, this you'd capture the information from the lease itself. So, for example, if I look at this particular lease, it would have had. I'm not going to open the lease for the sake of confidentiality of the client, but obviously we've got here the lettable area being 306 square meters. Bearing in mind, one would need to clarify whether it's net or gross square meterage. Then we've got the building age. We capture the building age if it's available. We capture the car parking if it's indicated, how many spaces on title, along with the common property car parking area. Quite often the lease would dictate that to you. The local council, that would be the local municipality equivalent here in South Africa. So you could say ekurhuleni, eThekwini, whichever local municipality. The zoning information, obviously, South Africa would have its own various zoning information. You'd capture that information. This is just for capturing the lease content, right? From this translates into an actual document, the report. So for purposes of this exercise, we'll just indicate the necessary information here. Now, insurance expiry. In international markets and in Australia, it's important to capture the relevant insurance information. This is more for the sake of clarity for the client, for the property that they're purchasing. The lease does not necessarily contain that. However, sometimes it may. It's quite important if you can capture that information for the client. Management company, that refers to the property manager. In some cases, it's indicated in the lease. Some cases, it's not, in which case we request that information from the client. Tenant information. This is now, when it comes to a tenant, you've got the actual tenant name, and then you've got what the tenant is trading as. So in this case, it's usually a Pty limited tenant. That's the company name. Then they would quite often have a trading as name, which would be different. So for example, you could have a company name like this, but the trading as name would be Smiling All the Way Clinic. That would be the trading as name. So it's important to differentiate the company name from the trading as name. The ABN or ACN, that's the company number. In Australia, they call it the Australian business number or Australian company number. Locally, it's referred to as your CC number or your PTY, your company number. We capture that information for the clients as well. When it comes to the gross income, that varies as per the individual lease. Every lease will differentiate from the next. So some leases may be gross leases, some leases may be net lease, in which case, whether or not the expenses are fully recovered from the tenant or not, that would need to be established via reviewing and reading the lease carefully. So when you're capturing your information, column by column, you can capture that data and then calculate whether the information is going to be relevant or not. So the net income can be calculated separately. Each lease will indicate what's going on. So every lease will indicate the net income differently. Why we need the net income is to derive your net yield in the beginning. It's your net income divided by your purchase price will give you your net yield. Moving on, so here's the lease term. It will indicate what period of the lease, how many years. You capture that information, then you move on to the lease commencement. That's the lease start date, being the, for example, here, 1st of October 2024, expiring at the every lease will be different, but if it's not indicated, then if it says for 2 years, then it would fall on the 30th of November. In this case, it was indicated as 20th of November 2026. So if it's indicated as an exact date, you capture it as it's indicated in the lease. Lease start date, lease end date. That's basically what you're capturing there. That's very important, as well as the lease period, how long the lease is for, the term of the lease, or by 3-year renewal options. What this means is the tenant has got the option to renew it for 3 years, and then another 3 years there afterwards. They've got 2 options to renew. Then you've got the reviews. What this means is escalation. The terminology, as I referred to earlier, we say tomato, tomato, or potato, potato. So in this case, we've got annual reviews. In Australia, they call it annual reviews. In South Africa, we call it escalation. So in South Africa, this would be the greater of CPI, Consumer Price Index, or 3%, right, per annum, annual rental increase, whichever is greater, right? So that's what you would capture from your South African lease, your escalation. annual rental escalation. Then typically here in South Africa, it varies, but most leases for commercial are on average 6, 7, or sometimes 7.5 to 8%. For retail rental escalations per annum. In Australia, it's slightly different. It's lower. 3% would be the annual escalation. Market review of the rent would be determined as per each individual lease annually or at the market rental review when the lease expires. So every lease would be different. That's how they determine what the market rent would be at the expiry of the lease. Lease security, that refers to what is the security deposit for the lease. 2 months initial rent, an amount of that 9,583 plus goods and services tax, right? So this would be quite similar to South Africa, where you'd put your how many months rental as your security. Occupy 100% of the property or not. Local municipality, but deep breakdown. This is regarding the outgoings. Outgoings means the property expenses. So all these highlighted in orange are referring to individual property expenses per tenant. So for example, your property rates would be an amount there, land tax, water and waste rates, administration fees. These are individual. And if it's zero, you leave it blank or you leave it as a zero amount. Strata, this means the total title body corporate. It's your levy. All these amounts are inputted as annual amounts. So make sure every single amount that you capture when you're analyzing a lease is captured as an annual amount. If it's not in an annual amount, and if it's in a monthly amount, you'll have to annualize it by saying the amount multiplied by 12. So you just capture that annual amount as an expense. Moving on, you would capture all the various expenses as you go along, management fees, pest control. In South Africa, they have a very similar when it comes to leases. You've got all these varying expenses, cleaning, electricity, garden maintenance, security, building insurance, management property. When it says management fee, that's the property management fee. In Australia, it's calculated on average to be around anything from 3.5% to 5% of the gross income as a management fee. In South Africa, I believe it's around, it depends how they negotiate a contract with the property manager. However, you're looking anything between around, say, it depends how much the landlord negotiates with the property manager, but it's between 5% or around there, 5 to 10%, anything around there. You keep going on, you've got your annual expenses captured all the way until the end. What I would like to draw your attention to would be a calculation. No way in average lease. What this means is it's analyzing the it's an indication of how long weighted average lease expiry. So how long the security of income is. So, for example, I've got this 10 indicates here that where it shows you your individual tenants Pizza Hut, and a Pizza Hut, for example, right? And then it's got how many years the lease is, what is the lease period, and how many options, what's the net tenant is. So these tenants are paying net rents. Only this first tenant is paying a recoverable expense of 21,000 per annum, and that gives you the gross income amounts annualized. With the rent reviews, again, rent review means rental escalation per tenant. And going back to the whale, we've got the same information captured here with the lease start, lease end date, the total square meterage per tenant. And then we've captured the day as lease expiry, current date. So I've got a formula that goes here equals today, and it puts today's date. So I use this as my template to calculate the whale, the weighted average leasing expiry. And what this does, it calculates the remaining days from today's date, current date, until the expiry date, and how many days are remaining. It then calculates the portion of rent as well, so you can see where the risk of highest income sits per tenant. As you can see, vacancy here, but there's a rental guarantee from the landlord. So meaning when they sell this property, they are going to provide a rental guarantee for 12 months. That's what was agreed in the purchase contract. So every contract is negotiated individually, and each lease has its own details. But if you capture your information in a spreadsheet where you can see the individual
Hello, Siddeeq, Mashilo. If you the quality of the
of
sorry, the
revenue.
quality of the broadcast is sorry. If you switch off the video, it may improve a little bit. Thank you. We can hello, Siddeeq? Ladies and gentlemen, just give us a moment as we get Siddeeq back, so that we try and improve the quality of the line. Siddeeq?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I
Yeah,
just got
now
disconnected. It's a lot better now.
a lot, much better. Much
I
better.
apologize for that, man.
No, that's okay. It only started for a few minutes. I won't disturb you anymore. You can continue.
No. Yeah, look, I won't take much more of the time. I don't know how much time I've got remaining. Can you advise, please?
You've got about between 5 and 10 minutes.
Okay,
If we
I'll
allow
try to wrap it
for a
up.
quick Q&A, yeah, you're still fine. Yeah.
Okay, so just to wrap up now, we were talking, I'm going to wrap up the weighted average leasing expiry. That basically shows your risk per lease regarding the revenue in the asset. So you can see as a portion of the total rent, who's paying what amount, and how much of it is at risk. So for this one here, the bulk of the income lies with IGA. IGA is a local grocery and fast movable consumable goods store, equivalent of like your Spar here in South Africa. So yeah, that's pretty much got the whale wrapped up. An example of the final output I can share very quickly would be done this this one here. Just share this with you very quickly. So this is the property that was being purchased. What it does, it basically, here we've got the details. We've got the key attributes. The subject property is situated at that, offering a prime investment opportunity in the heart of a rapidly growing. So that's all the description of the property. But here's the tenants, right? It says upstairs vacant office space with an IGA of Pizza Hut and a liquor stacks. But what I actually want to show you guys would be the some photos of what you can see. That's what the property looks like. It's a commercial property with the Pizza Hut, liquor stacks, and the IGA grocery. And then upstairs, a vacant office space. So the client was looking at purchasing this property. That's what's known as a survey plan. A survey here in South Africa, they call it the SG diagram. The location, which is, as you know, as you would find in a valuation report, similar, where you got your location map and an aerial map, a little brief description on the key distances, you know, from the subject property to the various key points of interest. Then we put the flood mapping, and then we do something called a tenant discussion summary, where we contact each tenant and find out would they be interested in renewing their lease at the property or not, and any other comments. But what I actually wanted to dig into was the tenancy profile. Each tenant gets a profiled write-up. So here we go. It says Independent Grocers of Australia is a prominent supermarket chain in Australia focused on supporting locally owned. So this gets done together with the a snapshot summary in a table format, where it tells you exactly the key content of the lease, being the lease start date, lease end date, the lease period, the lease tenant, the tenant's name, what's the lessee's name, options, how many options they have to renew the lease, the escalation. This one has a formula, but if you look at the next one, it would have, for example, a liquor store has a 3% annual rental increase. 100 square meters, you know, how much they pay in terms of expenses, 9% of the total property, and the total net income that they pay per annum. All these are per annum amounts. And then when we look at the financial analysis for the entire property, that would be the total property expenses. But then we do a detailed breakdown per tenant. So this one would be for the IGA, and it gives a detailed breakdown per expense for each tenant. So this one is for the IGA, tenant 1, tenant 2, outgoings, tenant 2 property out expenses. This is for the liquor stacks. They occupy 100 square meters, and that's the detailed breakdown of the expenses. So that's when it comes to a multi-tenanted property. Obviously, if it's a single tenanted property, it would be a lot more straightforward and a lot more simple. In terms of unlocking value, we do have some instances where you can unlock value in terms of the lease. If the lease is being if the market rent within the lease is below market, in this case we analyze the lease rents. So we capture comparable rentals within the market for retail, and obviously this had an office component on the upper level, so we had to provide some comparables for the office rents up on the upper level, and we gave examples and the locations of those rents that were being achieved. In South Africa, they do it on a rate per square meter per month. In Australia, it's analyzed as a rate per square meter gross per annum, plus goods and services tax. So when you discuss and you compare rentals, it's analyzed as a rate per square meter per annum. So you always got to make sure when you're analyzing a lease, you got to look at the main thing. Am I looking at a monthly or am I looking at an annual amount in terms of the rental? And when you're analyzing your lease and analyzing your data, make sure you are looking at the correct amounts per square meter, whether it's per month or whether it's a rate per square meter per annum. Those are the main key differences as an introduction for today. And yeah, I'll hand over to you now, Mashilo.
Siddeeq, thank you very much. And there's one or two things that I just need to ask. I mean, what I get from what you're saying, and you said it without saying it, that as a valuer and as a person who has to do analysis of leases, particularly in a valuation space, you need to be au fait with using Excel. That means your Excel skills must be polished because you're going to rely on Excel quite a bit in order to do analysis. You've said it without saying it, that Excel becomes important in your life to be able to, one, to capture the information, two, it allows you through the formulas to be able to do an analysis of that particular information. It's a very important tool in the life of a valuer. The ability to have the Excel skills and you use the spreadsheets quite a bit in order to do that analysis. This is quite an important takeout for me that I picked up from that. The second takeout, before I ask one or two questions, is that, and also, if you don't mind, I'll open for one or two questions from the floor before I release you, and then I can do the rest of the day, is that you have mentioned that valuers and anybody who do lease analysis, whether for investment or whatever purposes, they must be careful of the region in which that particular lease is based, you know. And then if you can clarify that, because it's a very important thing that I might be sitting in South Africa, but the client that I'm dealing with might be a client that is in Uganda, is in Australia, is in New Zealand, or it's in the UK. That means the measurement systems or the way that they decode the rentals or the way that they do the lease might be different, particularly the way that they capture the information. Can you be able to elaborate on that? Because it's an important fact that we should not lose.
Yes. Thank you for that question, Mashilo. Look, first off, to reiterate and to emphasize what you've mentioned regarding Excel. In order to excel in your career, you need, or excel in any format regarding being analytical. One needs to have competency, very good competency in Microsoft Excel. So they've used the word very well when naming this product by Microsoft, because it just makes things easier when you are working with volumes of data. So for example, here we have, look at this formula. It's quite advanced. It's a horizontal lookup formula that's looking up data in another tab, in another spreadsheet, which references the following, So they're quite advanced formulas that you got to be able to create to calculate information and pull up information without manually doing it. This one has a VLOOKUP formula, vertical lookup formula. So very important to try to, master your Excel skills as best as possible, because it just automates your life. And in this day and age, when you're dealing with multi-tenanted, like this one had 4 leases, is not much. But you will encounter, when you're analyzing leases, you'll encounter properties that have, in excess of 10 leases. And in those cases, you need to be able to capture information and process data very, very competently and without error. But to answer that was the first part, just covering regarding the Excel is very important. So emphasizing the importance of Excel. Now, when you speak about the various regions and places where you are, where you are conducting your work, your line of work, whether it's locally or whether it's international, whether it's in Africa. When I worked here in South Africa, we used to do cross-border work in Nigeria, in Rwanda, in Mozambique, in Kenya, And a lot of those leases are in dollar amounts, and they are US dollar based rentals. And one would obviously need to peruse those leases very carefully. And when you peruse and capture the data from those leases, you want to capture it not by hand. You want not written down. You want to capture it in a nice table format, whereby you can see the visibility of the information and the data, and be able to use formulas to calculate things. For example, this one, you from here you can see I was working around with the increase of rentals here. So every deal that you're working on will differ. So again, you got to be very wary of the area and the location. Now in Australia, they've got several different states. Every state operates differently with regards to how they structure their leases. So you have to be conscious of which state you are dealing with, and how they structure their leases, and capturing the information, whether it's a net lease or a gross lease, and how are they recovering their property expenses, the outgoings. So paying careful attention to number one, making sure, is the rent being paid on a monthly basis or an annual basis? In the Middle East, they do it quite often in an annual basis as well. So you'll have to make sure you are capturing your amounts in an annual basis. But if here in South Africa, they give you monthly rental, so you have to still analyze the lease in terms of when you're doing your total, you'll put a monthly amount. For example, maybe it's $1,000. Oh wait, for example, I'll put it in rands amount, say 12,000 rand per month that they're paying. And then if it's then, so you'll have a monthly column on the top, and then on the top here you'll have an annual amount, and then you just simply put a formula where you say 12,000 multiplied by, and then I would usually put a 12 here on the top, and then reference that cell. But when you reference it, you must dollar reference. And understanding what a dollar reference is means it locks the cell. So you got a cell lock for that. So you got 144,000 rand per annum at 12,000 rand per month. So you'd have to break this down into its individual components. But if you work, for example, working on a lease in Nigeria, it would be in dollar terms. You'd want to make sure you're capturing whether it's monthly or annual. That's very important not to make this mistake, and make sure you capture the data, and make sure when you're capturing that data, you specify whether it's monthly or annual. And that's with regards to the income as well as the expenses. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Side.
Thanks, Siddeeq. We've got a question from Ruka Jenisao. Thank you, Ruka. It says, do you consider reserve fund in your leases?
It depends. Every lease is structured differently. Thank you for your question, Ruka. So, for example, here in South Africa, do you consider reserve funds in your lease? Some leases may be structured where it contains a reserve fund. By reserve fund, I would assume this would be like a security, or like in Australia, they would refer to it as a lease security, some form of a lease security. So here we call it lease security, and every lease would be different. So a reserve fund, I'm assuming that's what you are referring to. Perhaps you can answer this.
All right. Let me see if Ruka is available.
Or is Ruka referring to a reserve fund in terms of body corporate, where you've got contribution like a reserve fund levy?
Yeah. I'll just ask the organizers to make available that Ruka can speak. If you can allow Ruka to speak. Ruka, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Hi, Siddeeq.
Hi, Ruka, how are you?
I'm fine. I mean, reserve fund is sort of like a portion of money which is contributed by all the tenants so that they will be able to replace or repair common areas.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
like a sinking fund.
Yes.
Sometimes they call it sinking fund.
Yes, correct. So if you have
But
a look
in
at
Australia, you call it reserve fund.
Correct. So if you just have a look at, can you see my screen? Is it shared?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm going to share screen now. I'm going to show you an example quickly. All right. So from my side, can you guys see?
Yeah,
the
now
screen?
I can see.
Right.
Yes.
So we've got in here the orange highlighted cells, the column headings. There's the sinking
Yes.
fund, right? So in this particular one, there was no sinking fund amount, but there are cases where, for example, where you will find there will be a sinking fund. So I'll go to the other sample I had here. I think there may be sinking fund. Yes. So you'll see these are all different deals I've done. So going down is each deal, and each one is unique. So every lease will be different. And there'll be a sinking fund contribution. Like I mentioned earlier, this is total strata. That's a combination of the total amount towards the body corporate. So in this case, they've got various amounts which total up to the 2145, or various amounts that will equal the 4884, So you've got an admin fee plus the amount here for the sinking fund, which would give you your 4884. The same holds true with all these other values, but it's individual per property. Everyone is unique. Each property is unique. So for example, this one, 4184, would be the combination of this, or 2698. Each one is individual. Every property is dealt with separately. So yes, to answer your question, a reserve fund in South African context, yes, you would have to capture that information and ask the property manager or the landlord for details regarding that, and who is responsible for that payment. Is it the landlord or is it the tenant when you are capturing that reserve fund levy, or whatever it may be, admin fee, audit fee, insurance. Sometimes insurance, they've got sometimes the leases, would be structured in a way where the tenant is liable towards paying some form of contribution towards that. So it's important to always ask the question when you are conducting your lease analysis. Ask the question to the property manager and to the landlord or the owner in terms of who is responsible for that contribution, towards the payment of that expense.
There's a question from Kura, but before I go to the question from Kura, and welcome Kura, is Siddeeq, you did mention the point, you did make a point that when you're doing the analysis of the lease, you must be careful of how the space is measured. And then in that, you did mention two things. The first one, you says the type of property that you're dealing with has a different way in which the measurement is done. The offices are different from the retail, how the measurements are done, whether it's a trading area or a gross lettable area or a common area. So, and you did mention that you must be careful. You must be able to read the lease, look into the lease, the measurement that have been provided, those measurements, how are they used in relation to the rent that is provided for, because you may have to do adjustments. What do you mean by that? If you can elaborate on that a little bit further.
Okay, so just to clarify, in South Africa, we have GLA and GBA, gross built area. Gross built area is typically referred to with regards to industrial assets. And GLA is typically referred to when we're dealing with retail and commercial assets. So what they would do is they would calculate, wall-to-wall internal walls when dealing with your retail rentals and commercial rentals. When you're dealing with your industrials, they take it from the gross built area. So they would calculate it in terms of that. Now, when you're talking about your lease versus your actual measurements, now we're talking another, this is a different discussion. This is referred to as verification of areas. When one does, this is now more in tune and in line with the role of a valuer when you go out to site to conduct your site inspection, and you are verifying those areas, the lettable areas that the tenant is paying rent versus what is actual in terms of what's on site when you conduct your valuation inspection. And you verify, you'll do your site inspection notes and you'll write down the area that you captured when you are using your laser measurer or your measuring wheel. And then when you go back to your office and you are now reconciling those lease areas against the actual occupied lettable areas at the property, then it will indicate to you if there's any discrepancy or any variance. We usually allow for a variance, a small margin of error of about 10% allowance, give or take. That's allowable, but anything more than that becomes considered significant variance in lettable area versus the leased area, what's indicated in the lease versus what's actual occupied and lettable area based on your site inspection notes and calculations. So, and then, you open up the conversation and the discussion in a civil manner, raise the matter with the property manager and the owner of the property, and you say, look, this is what our findings are. And you then take the conversation and the discussion further from there. But in terms of, going back to the subject topic, lease analysis, it's important to understand what you are capturing in your lease and understanding the difference between GLA, GBA. There's also another term called GFA, gross floor area, but that's usually typically in your town planning, when you would calculate that, refer to that sort of terminology. But for purposes of this presentation, we'll just stick to the GLA and GBA and, reconciling and making sure what you're capturing from the lease in your Excel spreadsheet is correct, especially when you're dealing with multi-tenanted assets.
It's a nice segue to our final question, which deals with multi-let scenario. It's from Kura, and he says, "Great presentation, Sid." That's his words. He said, "How do you vary a cap rate to the quality of the tenant in a multi-tenanted scenario?"
Yes, that's a good question, Kura. So typically we analyze it based on the net income against the value of the property or the purchase price. But in which case, where you do not have that information available, it's usually a case of looking. Now he's referring to a cap rate. In Australia, they don't use that term. They call it yields or equivalent yield. Ultimately, here in South Africa, we utilize the cap rate term, capitalization rate. And in valuation context, the capitalization rate is the percentage rate that in which you would capitalize. You technically taking the net income of the property and you're dividing it by the value of the property to derive a cap rate. In this case, what Kura, if I understand correctly, can we unmute Kura and are we able to get him on the line?
If we can, colleagues, if you can just unmute Kura so that he can get on the line.
Hi, Kura.
My leader, how are you doing, my valuer?
Hey, Kura, good to catch you on the online. Kura and I go back a long way. We actually completed and done our masters many years ago together at the University of Pretoria.
I'm glad to be the connector of friends.
Yes.
Kura, go ahead.
Thank you. Sure. So, in the scenario of a multi-let property, do you risk adjust? So the cap rate is a risk adjustment of a cash flow. Do you risk adjust on a global level, so net income for the whole property, or do you go by Checkers, by Pep, and then Kura and Sons Fish and Chip Shop? Those have different cap rates within, and they add up to a global number, or do you take a view and blend an application of one number to the whole, if I'm making sense?
I hear your question. So you're talking in terms of valuation perspective, how do we derive cap rates, if I understand correctly?
And apply them when you've got different underlying qualities. You've got a 10-year lease with Checkers, and you've got a 5-year lease with a guy who sells cell phones, and then Kura's Fish and Chip Shop.
Yeah, perfect. Beautiful question. I love this question. So ultimately, we would go back to the conventional method, and the most relied upon would be the comparables. You look at and analyze comparable sales to see what are similar type assets of a similar asset class, similar size. You have to compare apples with apples. So if you can, you would have to analyze and look at sales within the area to look at what sort of yields are being achieved for that sort of asset. I would like to, give an example very quickly, if that's okay with the Mashilo. Mashilo, can
Go
I?
ahead. Yeah,
okay.
always the pleasure. Yeah.
Mashilo, I'm going to share a very quick screen with you guys, if you don't mind.
Yeah, you can go ahead and share, Siddeeq.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. I want to make sure there's a good connection from my side before I do that. All right, I'm sharing screen with you guys now. Share, there we go. So I've got a document here. This is the valuation of a very big deal I completed. Was a $17 million asset with a KFC on site. Now, what I'm looking at here, I'll show you shortly. Trying to just go down to the key essentials, just so you have a bit of a context of what it is. It's a shopping center with 11 tenants. It had a KFC, a car wash in purple, the KFC in red, and a few other smaller tenants on the site, like a Turkish kebab shop and a barber shop, etc. Now, this particular asset, I'm going to go down in terms of analyzing and deriving and getting a yield which would be applicable for this particular asset. So the best way for me to explain it would be by showing you the example of the comparable sales evidence, whereby we utilized this is now the rental evidence. So when we provide rental evidence together with sales evidence. Rental evidence is just to analyze the rentals to make sure they are in line with market. Then we got the sales evidence section, where we analyze. This is an analysis of a sale. This is a different discussion. It's not a lease analysis, but it's an important question that Kura asked, which, for the interest of the listeners, they can gain value. So in this example, this property sold in December 2024. It's under contract for 14.75. Site area, it's got all these beautiful details, but you've got the lettable area 1299. This is the important number here, 870,780 as a net passing annual income. When you divide that by your 14.75, that would give you your yield. And in this case, it gave us the yield of 5 point. In this case, let's just pull it up here. I'll show it. I'll calculate it for you guys. Let me pull it up here. 870,780. $14.25 million. percentage, 6.11. Here we go back here. But in this case here, it's not not quite working out with that. They've obviously done an adjustment to a minor adjustment, as Kura mentioned, but we can look at another example as well. We've got the net income at 865, 866, and 14.1. Just trying to show you guys an example of 14.1. Kura, are you there? There we go.
Very much, my leader.
So we've got, in this case here, it's 865, 866 as the net passing income, meaning that's the contractual lease income, right, per annum. After all expenses is 865 as your net annual income. 865, 866 divided by the 14.1 gave me the 6.14. This is based on sales that transacted. So Kura, to answer your question, you'd have to get sales similar to your property, your subject property, right? And analyze comparable sales, net passing income divided by the sale price of that property, relevant. And when you say relevant, you mean it needs to be very similar in terms of the lettable area as well as the mix of tenants. So when you're saying you've got a Checkers and you've got, you know, the Checkers being your anchor, you'd have to make sure when you're looking at sales now to derive your cap rate that you're going to apply. You can't just apply Roeder report applied cap rate because Erwin Roeder says it's roughly 5 to 6% or 5.5%, you know, or 5.25%. Every quarter makes a difference. Every 0.25% of a cap rate makes a difference on that value, on this final value when you are capitalizing your net annual income. So it's important to compare apples with apples and get current data. Like here's a nice sample here. So this one's net passing income, 984,493 divided by 15 million would give you this initial net yield of 6.56. You'd use that as a guide. And here's a little commentary on, you know, in terms of how it compares. Comparison-wise, the sale is located within an inferior overall location with comparable exposure attributes. The sale location has inferior population growth forecasts. The asset is of a larger mixed-use complex comprising a childcare, a retail, and allied healthcare tenants of similar quality. But if we look at the previous one, how it compares, so, you know, when you're doing your analysis of sales, you'd put 3 to 4 sales. You do your little calculation like how we have here, a little photo so you can see a visual of what the property looks like and a bit of commentary regarding the asset and how it compares to your subject. You know, this sale is located with within a slightly superior overall location with a superior exposure attributes. The sale location has inferior population growth forecast. The sale is of a similar size retail complex with 2 QSR. This means quick service retail tenancies, the likes of drive-through KFC, for example. In this Red Rooster means that's a franchise similar to our KFC or our Chicken Licken here in South Africa. Yeah, so
All right.
Kura, are you there? I hope that answers your question.
Danke.
No worries. No worries.
I'm canceling my subscription to an aforementioned report.
It's not on our account. Siddeeq, thank you very much. And thank you for taking the time. We've reached the end of this particular session. As I've mentioned, the Academy of Construction and Real Estate is very interested in professional development. So for those that are on the line that have joined us, keep your eyes open in terms of, and make sure that you have joined the community. If you go to either the Africa Valuation Conference website or you go to the Land Property in Africa website, you will find somewhere where you can join the community. Once a month or twice in a month, we will have these sessions. if you want to connect with Siddeeq, you can find him on LinkedIn. It's Sid space Omar, SID space OMAR, Sid Omar. And then you must just look for Rethink. And then that will be Siddeeq Omar, who has joined us today. In terms of to close, I'd like to thank the Academy of Construction and Real Estate and each and every one of you for being able to join us. There's quite a number of lessons that you can take with you that Siddeeq has shared with us. One of those is about look out for regulated rentals. What do you do in those when you do your analysis? I know majority of us, what Siddeeq has provided, we might call it a rent roll or whatever, or you're going to receive some form of a rent roll to be able to do your analysis. The advice that we're given is that even if you get a rent roll, when you do a lease analysis, you still have to do your own calculation like he did. He showed us how to work out the yield so that you make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. Don't compare the KFC to the Checkers. If you've got a KFC in the building, go and look out for the KFC and look what's the yield for that KFC to do an analysis. And there is a difference between a retail lease, an office, and a residential lease or an industrial lease. And measurements are important. What you read out of the lease might not necessarily match what exists in reality. Thank you very much for each one of you for contacting us. There's a question around whether how you're going to get this. What normally happens is that the team at Africa Valuation Conference, they've got a YouTube channel where you can go and you'll be able to access this particular webinar. Not immediately today, but in a couple of days or a week, you should be able to access this particular webinar. And thank you. My name is Mashilo Pitjeng. For those that wants to follow me on LinkedIn, look out for a chap called Mashilo Pitjeng. If you're on Twitter, it's Black Tsebo, BLK Tsebo, TSEBO. You should be able to find me and my hair. Thank you very much. And thank you for spending time with us. Enjoy yourself. Until we meet again, I hope to see you at the Africa Valuations Conference from the 1st to the 3rd of April. Meet you there. Thank you very much. And thanks, Siddeeq, for your time.
No problem. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I owe you that coffee.
No problem. And I hope all the listeners enjoyed it and were not too bombarded with information. But I wish everyone well and all the best. Thank you, Mashilo, and thank you, Aka.
Yeah, I think they did because there's a comment that says, great minds. It's been a great presentation, Sid. So that must be the sentiments of almost. And thank you, George, for putting up that particular comment. And thank you, everybody. Enjoy yourself. Until we meet again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.